Hello, I'm Mark Engel with Association Management Center. Today's April 24th, and we're here with Jerry Jacobs. Jerry is the Pillsbury Law Firm's nonprofit organization practice leader. He's also been general counsel for ASAE, and he's the author of a dozen books in nonprofit law, including what all of us should have at our desk side, Association Law Handbook, which is now in its 6th edition. Jerry is widely recognized as an expert in governance and legal matters for nonprofit organizations. Jerry, first of all, how are you and your family and your colleagues holding up in this environment?
Thanks, Mark. And I'm very happy to be chatting with you about association topics. I came to our vacation house in Florida in early March for the weekend, but we're holding up very well. Florida seems to have been late in getting into the whole social distancing, masks, gloves routine, but now it's very common and very standard, and I'm encouraged on the few times every week or 10 days that we go out.
Okay, well, with the disruption we have in our community these days and world, obviously, there's a focus away from face-to-face board meetings. And so we do look at virtual governance in a significant way. And it gets us to thinking about the decision-making by the board and by association leadership. And so there are certain elements that we know that the board must be focused on, such as the budget or audit approval, some elections and appointments and so on. But when we get down to some more of the granular elements that we often put before a board, such as canceling a hotel contract or some other urgent issues, can you help discern for us what the board must make a decision on and what they can really delegate to another body for decision-making in this type of an environment?
State statutes provide in every state that the board is responsible for managing the affairs of the organization. That's the language most often used. It varies a little. And we know that boards don't manage the affairs of associations. We know that management manages the affairs of associations. But ultimately, the board has statutory legal responsibility for managing the affairs. The courts, the cases are almost all in the business corporation context, but the courts permit boards to delegate a great deal to executives, to consultants, etc. And so, you know, if an organization is used to meeting 5 or 6 times a year for full day meetings, or 4 times a year for a 2-day meeting, and all of a sudden it makes no sense to have a 3-day meeting via, you know, Zoom, Skype, GoToMeetings, WebEx, then, you know, everything has to be contracted. I've, in the last 6 weeks now, sat through many board meetings online. After about half a day, it's hard to keep the attention of the board members going. One report after another in great detail. That may work in the context of a nice boardroom in a fancy hotel with a golf course and a pool just outside, and frequent breaks and a nice lunch. It doesn't really work online very well. So we're seeing an evolution toward shorter video conference board meetings. Audio conference board meetings are really tough. You know, you never really know what folks are doing, and a lot of people are obviously working elsewhere. Their phones muted and just listening in. You can tell when you call on somebody and it takes 20 seconds for them to respond that they were doing something else than listening to the board meeting. So we're seeing board meetings contracted. We're seeing boards focused more on the essential stuff. But beyond the statutory requirements, where boards have to vote on a few things, beyond the governance requirements, there are organizations that have bylaws that specify a list of stuff that boards must approve. I think it's archaic and old-fashioned. When we're asked to help with governance reform, we try to trim that stuff out. usually a one sentence, the board is responsible for overseeing the affairs of the organization, for reviewing the work of management, for setting long-term goals, and observing the implementation of those goals. And that's it. That's really what the best, in our view, bylaws provision on board responsibility is. So after the statutory requirements, the governance documents, bylaws requirements, ultimately you're going to have to deal with pattern and practice, culture in an organization. If a board is used to making tiny decisions on where the next 3 meetings are going to be held, and what it's going to cost, and what's the room rates, et cetera, to kind of wrest that sort of thing from a board, which I think ultimately needs to be wrested as governance reform proceeds over the years. But to do that abruptly, of course, has risks in offending board members, and you don't want to offend board members. So maybe what you do is present a plan for the next few board meetings, agendas, and approaches, and get the board to buy into that plan, so you can hold meetings maybe more frequently than previously, but truncated to half-day video meetings, maybe even 1-hour video meetings for really crucial stuff.